Here's what happened, guys. If you have big dreams as a small business owner, you will feel broke at some point if you haven't felt it already. And it looks different for each person. It could be the bank account going to zero or in the negative. Since starting my first business over 11 years ago in 2014 as a DJ, I've experienced that with the bank account. And I've lived off of chickpeas and sweet potatoes for days in a week. And I have spent tens of thousands of dollars that was saved for me from my grandparents and wiped that out. And these ups and downs happen as a small business owner. And through all that, what can help make life a lot easier is having a simple environment. And as small business owners, there can be a lot of focus on our habits and looking in the mirror and figuring out what am I not doing right with my marketing, my sales. I sent the email for the offer and then I got no response back and I got ghosted. So it can be a lot of individual focus, but also what we have to do as small business owners is also focus on society and our country to how can we simplify the environment for ourselves? And on this show, I've talked about a lot in this ownership series. And I want to recap for you again the key points in this series, what to expect for next week. So welcome back to the show. Happy Friday. Let's get into it because taxes is one of those ways we can simplify the environment and make life a lot easier for us as small business owners. And as small business owners, you think about it here in the US, there are 36 million small business owners across 1,000 different industries. And when we unite, we have a big voice in shaping the future. And right now, we are experiencing massive change. It's not something to ignore or to run away from. It's to embrace that massive change and start to channel it in a way where I believe America's future is a small business renaissance. And so how do we channel it in a way where we can feel supported and feel like we have a simple environment as small business owners that can make our life easier? And taxes is one of those. And it's not crazy to question that. You don't have to be labeled a bunch of different names or called a bunch of different names when you start to question this stuff. It is common sense because it's your tax-paying dollars when it comes to taxes that is being put into these different parts of our government where we aren't sure what's going on. We don't have a lot of transparency. And with anything, as it grows and gets bigger, and you can see that in the budget of the United States government to now how big the debt is, which is over $38 trillion here in the U.S., you absolutely have it's common sense to want to question where this money is going and do certain taxes make any sense anymore. So I have gone through this week going from a local level all the way up to the federal level. And again, on the federal level, it started with the State of the Union, President Trump talking about the possibility of tariffs significantly replacing the modern day federal income tax system. And that got me excited. And then with that, I went down the rabbit hole and understood the history of these different taxes. If it's on state level, the sales tax, to then local level within your city, you could be, as a small business owner, having to pay hospitality tax. So going through all these different taxes, you as a small business owner, what is really helpful to do, and what we have to continue to have conversations about, is within your industry or your type of business, what are the taxes that you're paying? And then look at the history of those taxes. Because some, like the hospitality tax, think of an example in South Carolina for the hospitality tax, it is less than 50 years old for that tax. And so there was a time where, and there are people still alive that lived through this time, where there was not a hospitality tax in South Carolina. And so what that can help for you is to break this illusion that just because it's the way things are doesn't mean it has to continue to stay that way. And as small business owners, you know that. As builders, as innovators, and especially though you having big dreams, you understand change is possible. But at times we can experience these psychological operations to try to say that we're dumb or that we shouldn't use common sense or to trust the experts. And we know how that worked out with COVID. And just make it seem like we're stupid. And we as small business owners have to push back on that and then lead the way, because America's future leaders are small business owners. And when we unite and understand, okay, how can we move forward and make America's future a small business renaissance and come together, we do have a big voice in our communities, because when small businesses are thriving, the quality of life of our communities improves. And we have to get back to what are the guardrails, because as I said, with anything big, and we know on the federal level of government how big it's gotten. With anything big, it can become very inefficient, and it can become easily corrupted. And this goes back to the principle of increased entropy, where over time things break down. And there has been so many examples throughout history where this has occurred, going back to major empires like the Roman Empire, and how eventually over time it breaks down. And when we understand that and are reminded of that, we can come back to what are the guardrails? How can we consciously bring more positive energy into these systems to make sure that we are counterbalancing the natural decay that's going to happen? And so this is put on the guardrails, understanding our moral values, being reminded of our history. And what built the West, our Western civilization, was the work now, pay after. And I've talked about this before in the show of the BNPLs, buy now, pay later. You can see that on your checkout page, where you can pay it for then you pay it and then pay it over time, or buy now then pay later over like 4 payment installments. And we've become built on a foundation of debt and of this credit centric economy here in the U.S. that I think about for where we're going for the future. It looks like a very dystopian future. And that is something that we as small business owners need to push back on and say, no, like we're not going to just go down that path. And we're going to fight for our Western civilization, because with the current generation of Gen Z, and the youngest generation entering into the workforce, when we can look to the youngest generation, we can see what the future could be like for our economy. And Gen Z is the most indebted generation for their age group in U.S. history. And so there is a big mess that we got to continue to clean up. And yes, it could be so easy as a small business owner to get stuck in your own small world and focus just on you and growing the business and getting by. And again, you got so much going on. But we also have a massive opportunity here to reshape the environment that we as small business owners live in. And it goes back to when you have the ups and downs in business, what makes life a lot easier is to have a simple environment. And when it comes to taxes, we got to ask ourselves, is it simple or complex? And we know is very complex, and it can be very stressful and very overwhelming. And I've shared stories, shared story of a Trudy business owner who, when every month she's having to pay the hospitality tax and sales tax and send that out, thousands of dollars, and the stress that can add into your life and the anxiety. And so what happens if some of those taxes go away? Or what happens in a decade from now if we actually are able to not pay any taxes as Americans? And we find all alternatives, if that's tariffs to other methods. What would that do for our quality of life? And it's not crazy to ask those questions. It is not crazy to question the quote experts, our elected officials, of where is this money going? Because the more you dive into it, the more I've dived into it, into the rabbit holes, you realize just how complex it is and how difficult it is to really get a transparency on where the money, our taxpaying dollars, are going. An itemized list. It can get into be put into these general funds of then the government deciding where that money goes based off of the needs. And we got to continue to ask these questions of, do we trust that the government has our best interest? And the answer is no. The answer is no. We have to hold our elected officials accountable. You have noticed that if you've heard about these stories of fraud, one coming out of Minnesota that I've talked about here before on the show, where it's in the billions. There's been different estimates put out there, 9 billion. Trump said at the State of the Union, 19 billion. No matter what, it's a lot of money. And then there's stories coming out in California, to Maryland, Maine. And so as we can guess, this is happening in many states. And some of them we just don't even know about. And so for me, I see it as, okay, do I want big government or do I want small government to solve my problems? And for me, it's like I'd rather have a limited government and put more of that on myself because I trust myself to be able to create a better quality of life for myself and for my family, for my community, for my country. I believe in the individual. And we got to get back to that here in Western civilization of focusing on the individual. It does not mean that we disregard our communities. No, by being able to make sure we protect our individual rights as Americans, we are then able to thrive more as a community and then as a society and a country. But we got to get back to, again, the values. One, discipline. Faith is another one. I've talked about my faith journey of coming back to Christianity and believing that God has a plan. And I do believe Christ is king. And when we move forward in faith as a small business owner, that is where we can move forward and witness miracles that happen in not only our business, but in our overall life. And I've experienced that myself. I've talked about that before relating to the event coming up in Charleston, South Carolina, a Future Fest, and how I experienced what I can only say is a miracle for how this event was able to continue to move forward in its first year for the introductory event. And or to move forward into now year 2 after the introductory event. So when we come back to these key parts of what built us as a Western civilization, and we're reminded that we do live in the greatest country in the history of the world, and this isn't just, I'm not just saying that. It's to get the generosity of this country. For Americans, the generosity of Americans, it's incredible to witness it. To the individual rights that we have, such as freedom of speech, to the ability to start a small business and to pursue the American dream. And are we in a big mess right now within this economy? Absolutely. Are there evil forces that are trying to drain our resources? Absolutely. That is there. I've spoken about these elites, and now now what's coming out with Epstein files, these elite pedophiles that are running our society. Like, we are waking up as Americans, and because of that, massive change is happening. And now we've got to decide what the future is. And for me, I see this future as America's future is a small business renaissance. And small businesses are the heart of the economy. So taxes is one area to simplify the environment that we got into. And then understanding with technology is another one, and our privacy. We've gone away from that for our privacy. And it can be easy as small business owners to just disregard that. But we also set the path, even if we don't realize it, when it comes to adopting new forms of technology, new ways to move forward and grow the business. And AI is here. There's no way we're putting it back in the box. But we as small business owners have to put boundaries around AI and make sure that we're continuously putting humans as the priority. And I said it for one of my predictions in the future that I wouldn't be surprised if we have human-only signs in small businesses as a way to differentiate in marketing across different industries. Because that is a significant opportunity that we have as small business owners, is to leverage the human first approach. And then coming back to the importance of going of here in America, of also supporting Americans and making sure it's America first as well. It doesn't mean it's America only, but we've gone away from that in our country, and we're seeing that with the different crises that are out there. And we've got to clean this mess up, and we are cleaning this mess up. And this movement is a big part of that, and we're mobilizing across the country. So that's what's been talked about, is ownership. Coming back to the ownership is really important. I want to continue down that series. And what I want to get into next week is talking about getting more into the history of the taxes, and specifically the FICA tax too. I want to talk about that because when it comes to estimates from the what is it called? I'm thinking of the name right now. I'm missing it. The Congressional Budget Office. That's what the Congressional Budget Office shows for estimates that basically, Social Security will be insolvent by 2032. And so we have a lot of massive problems that are coming on the horizon, where if we don't change our direction, it's going to create even more pain on our society. And so we got to get into that tax. Like, you paying that tax, matching it for what's withheld from your employees. I mean, you could even argue it's a form of extortion. And we got to realize, does this make any sense to keep going down this path? And for me, I say no. It does not make any sense. And so that is where we got to continue to get curious and ask questions. And it's not crazy to do that. And you got to remember that. And we got to remember that together as a society. And I do get really excited and hopeful for the future, to see way less taxes, and the U.S., let's say the U.S. federal tax code, get that from over 4,000 pages. What if we got that down to 400 to 4 pages? What could that do? And it's not crazy. What could that do for our society, for all Americans in our country? What would that impact be like for our cities and our towns? It's something to continue to think about and have conversations about, and how we move forward. But really important to remember who your elected officials are. Remember what is the history of the taxes that you're having to deal with as a small business owner, and noticing how has there ever been a time where this tax hasn't existed? It's important to ask those questions, because if that has been the case, then it is possible for us to make a change and bring that back in a new form for the future. So I'm excited for where this series is going to continue to go. I always appreciate your support in this. And then if you want to connect with other small business owners across the U.S. in person, you can join us for A Future Fest, January 14th to 15th, 2027 in Charleston, South Carolina, where you can connect with other small business owners who want to build a business that lasts and also cares about our country. We care about our country, and we want to see this country thriving. We are set up for the greatest comeback in history as a nation, and I do believe, that we as small business owners are America's future leaders, and America is the greatest country in the world, and it's something we cannot forget about, even with all the psychological operations that are telling us that, no, this is a terrible place, or feel guilty for being an American. It's absolutely ridiculous and absurd. I got sucked into those psychological operations. I had gotten brainwashed, and I'm grateful I got out of that and had other people to help lead the way in realizing how absurd and ridiculous those statements are. Does that mean we got problems here? Or does that mean that we're a perfect country? No, we absolutely do have problems, but we have to remind ourselves of just how great this country really is, and continue to move forward and be able to make sure that we make America's future a small business renaissance. So I'll see you guys next week.